dimension, a dimension of truth, a dimension of freedom, a dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the capitalist corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the capitalist corner.
Welcome to this special episode of the Capitalist Corner. We have with us tonight Fabian Liberty, also just Scott. Scott's not quite as snazzy, though. I got to tell you, Scott's not quite as snazzy as Fabian Liberty, right? Like Scott's kind of like, meh. It's like Mike, but Fabian Liberty. So
yeah, I go on a lot of panels.
Okay. So the other day I made a post and I said anarchy and liberty are not the same. Fabian Liberty disagreed with me. So we decided we're going to have a debate about the issue. We both agree that the freedom entails the exercise and security of one's rights. So before I think we can even get to anarchy, what I want to know, and you could start us off and then you can give an opening statement where it's not going to be real structure, to be a back and forth. Because I want to make sure that we're using the same, we mean the same thing by the same words. So
right.
What are rights? Why do we have them? And what is their purpose? And if you could answer those, and then you can go into your
succinctly answer what are rights? What are their purpose?
Sure.
How do we define them?
No. Why? No. Why do we, what is their purpose? Why do we have them? What is their purpose?
So I would say that rights, and this would obviously be excluding positive rights because that was a critique we had in the conversation, right? Just in the domain of negative rights or real rights, are discoveries of natural law that stem from various we could say various logical conclusions of the non-aggression principle. Right. I think we use rights in after the Enlightenment to be like we discover things we really don't want the government to do. But really, it all comes down to one specific right, which is the right to not be aggressed upon. Every other right either stems from that or doesn't stem from that. And I think the language of rights is a development of the Enlightenment. Like if we say this is a human right or property rights, or, the right to not be murdered or the right to not have your property stolen. All of these rights stem from one thing, which is just the non-aggression. So I think the colloquialization of rights, maybe, I guess I ask more like, what is it that, I'd prefer to hear, your pure objectivist framework of that, like discovering that through objective law. But that is, it's a shit definition, but that is what I'm like, that is kind of the problem with discussing rights as far as I see it. Why do we need them? I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say that we need them. I would just say that they are. Might makes right. I'm sorry, might doesn't make right, but it does make reality, right? Like we have these rights, but we don't necessarily get to choose whether or not we have them or whether or not we can exercise them if someone else is in the room with a bigger stick or, a gun. Why we ought engage in them, why we ought exercise those rights, because that is the greatest path towards human flourishment, and that is the only system that could be ethical, is one that isn't into contradiction or the law of the jungle.
Okay, just one more clarification. You said the non-aggression principle, and that, in your view, does that, in your view, stem from self-ownership?
Self-ownership is kind of the old way of grounding that axiom. I would say it stems from argumentation ethics.
So ownership comes from argumentation ethics, the self-ownership.
Not necessarily. No.
Rights come from argumentation. What comes from argumentation ethics? The non-aggression principle?
Well, the non-aggression principle originally, right, both from everybody that's using it, is an axiom, right? The argumentation ethics is a means by which of grounding that axiom. Proving that axiom is grounded, starting with existence exists, going into formal logic, going into performative contradiction, and then going into how one defines conflict as two or more individuals attempting to use scarce resources towards opposing means, right? And then that goes into argumentation and ethical systems as, if ethical systems are conflict inducing, then they are not a system of ethics. They're just a system of conflict. And if so far as an ethical system is one that is towards human flourishment, towards our survival, then it is one that isn't conflict inducing by its nature. And to argue against that becomes a performative contradiction. And therefore, to argue for an ethical system outside of the non-aggression principle is to argue for mixed law, which eventually becomes law of the jungle. It is just whimsy. It's just might makes right. That's a super like
one more
scaled
question.
down version. Hopefully.
Okay. All right. One more question I have is, why ought we not aggress against somebody?
Why ought we not aggress against someone?
Yeah. Why shouldn't I aggress against somebody?
Well, so I want to be very clear that I'm answering this as myself, right?
Yeah.
Where I have a lot of objectivist leanings, not necessarily purely to defend the ANCAP position, because it is my argument that ANCAP doesn't bridge the is-ought gap. Instead, it simply proves all of the things that say you ought aggress move into contradiction and are thus not ethical systems. Therefore, they're all just law of the jungle. They're all just, I have the bigger stick, so therefore you will do what I say. And that you can't justify your ethical system unless you follow the non-aggression principle. As myself, I would say the reason we ought follow an ethical system is so that me and my family and humanity can thrive and flourish and survive and progress and be able to be living conscious beings that continue the legacy and the values of those individuals forward into the future and create the world and survive and thrive in said world. And that to not do so is to limit that.
Okay. So do you want to give an opening statement, or do you want me to give an opening statement now that I've got a general understanding?
Yeah, I didn't know how the format was going to be.
However you want.
You know, I'm not a huge, I can be a debate bro. I don't like being a debate bro with fucking fellow travelers of liberty. I like having a conversation. But if you want to give an opening statement, I'm a
debate bro.
I'm a hardcore debate bro if you want that energy, but I try not to do that energy.
Debate bro is not like debating is a civil means of dealing with disagreements, right? The goal.
Sure.
Right. All right.
Usually on the internet, people mean debate bro as an insult.
Oh, I'm new to this, so I don't know. You know, I like to debate. I've liked to debate since I was a kid. So
do your intro.
All right. So
I'll shut up and listen.
My statement initially was that rights are not secure under anarchy. That liberty and anarchy are not the same. So when you talk about rights, right is a moral term. So when you say there is no ought, right off the bat, you're eliminating ethics from the equation. You're eliminating an objective morality, an objective ethic. There is no reason under that framework to say that there's objective law, there's objective rights, there's objective anything. I firmly believe there are oughts. And I believe that the oughts that we have stem from our nature, human nature, as rational entities, rational beings that are constantly face the possibility of death. So when we come into this world, we ultimately have to decide, we have to learn how to survive. We have to learn what's best for us. We have to learn how to act. These things don't come automatic to us. Now, also, there's a big difference, say, between the cup that I have here and take a frog, for instance. The frog has to constantly act to maintain itself. The cup doesn't. It's this idea that you have entities that have to constantly act to maintain themselves, that you have the concept of value, of something that is either good or bad. Now, the difference between me and the frog is the frog just comes into this world and it kind of automatically pursues what it's supposed to do to maintain itself. It knows, stick your tongue out, grab your fly, if that's even true. I don't know. I don't know much about frogs, but human beings, we have to discover that. We also have freedom of will. So we have to discover what's good or bad for us using our rational minds, and then we have to choose to implement it. Codifying the principles of long-term survival, of long-term well-being, is what we call ethics. It's a code of values to guide human behavior over the course of a lifetime. So if we have objective values, we have an objective morality, and then we have to say, well, what are the objective requirements of human survival? Now, obviously, when I say objective requirements, you can point to the exception of people who aren't ethical and live 100 years. Life is necessarily a probabilistic enterprise. Smoking is bad for you, but you can smoke, and you got the guy who smokes and lives to 100, the guy who doesn't smoke and dies at 20. That doesn't mean smoking is then good for you. Ethics is the same thing. And we're acting in such a way and codifying the principles that are going to allow us to maximize our ability to thrive. So, and this is not, these are not my creations. This is not my discovery. I'm an objectivist. Ayn Rand has convinced me that she is by and large correct. So Ayn Rand identifies reason, purpose, and self-esteem as the three fundamental values. Why? Well, reason as our means to survival. It's our means to gain knowledge. It's our means to learn even what is right and wrong, what we should be doing. So that should be a value. Purpose, because reason can't operate without purpose. It has to be directed to some end. Our survival requires purposeful behavior. And then self-esteem. And by self-esteem, I mean the belief that I am both capable of living and worthy of it. Why capable? Because if I don't think I can accomplish something, I'm not likely to try it. And why worthy? If I don't think I deserve it, I'm not likely to go after it. These are my values. So then Rand steps forward next and says, okay, well, what about virtues? And by virtues, she means the actions you take to get your values. What are the principles of human survival? So she says, well, rationality is the cardinal virtue. And then rationality has 6 derivative virtues. They're productiveness, honesty, integrity, justice, independence, and pride. I'm just going to go with 2 because I don't want to go through the whole list. But we could get a pretty good idea of it. Productiveness, because life requires production. If we want to live, if we want to survive long term, we have to produce the values. We have to produce the things that our life requires. Honesty, why? Well, honesty is the recognition of reality and the refusal to make up an alternative reality. Well, I live here in reality. So if I'm going to thrive, I have to go by the rules of reality. If I think I can, if I try to make it up and say, well, I can just drink poison and I can survive, I'm obviously not going to be able to. I have to adhere to reality. I have to adhere to what reality is. Justice. Justice means to give people what they deserve. Now, in an egoistic world where obviously if life is the standard of value, my own life is the standard by which I judge my morality. I'm looking to act in my own interest. Justice entails giving to people what they deserve. Why? Because I want to live in the kind of world where people share the right values. So if people are productive, if they're honest, if they have integrity, I want to encourage that. Because if you encourage that, it grows. I want to discourage people who are doing the wrong things. So that's why I practice justice. The others, independence, pride, and integrity. Independence just means you have to think for yourself, act for yourself. You're not dependent on other people for intellectual, moral, or physical sustenance. Pride means the creation of character, is striving for moral perfection, and integrity means loyalty to rational principles. So when I look at these, I say, okay, these are the requirements for my own survival. This, by and large, would be true, no matter how many people I come in contact with. So then I say, okay, should I ever aggress against somebody else? Well, if I aggress against somebody else, am I producing? Well, no. Am I being honest? Well, not really, because I'm trying to take what's, somebody else's. I'm trying to live the way that's not conducive to my nature. Am I independent? No, because I'm now dependent on this guy. Am I just? Certainly not, because I'm not giving him what he wants. So I know now that I should not initiate force. That just tells me about my own behavior, right? So I may next ask the question, okay, when is force appropriate? Well, if somebody initiates a force against me, if somebody aggresses against me, I certainly can retaliate. It's perfectly moral for me to do so because I have a moral claim to my own life, to my own well being. My life is my standard of value. Therefore, I have a moral claim to it. And if I have a moral claim to my life, I have a moral claim to the actions that are necessary to sustain it. I do not have a moral claim to initiate force against somebody else. A moral claim is what we call rights. So it's not so the non-initiation of force stems from an entire antecedent ethical framework. And even beyond that, an epistemological and metaphysical framework. It's not something that's just postulated. It certainly isn't a religious command, thou shalt not initiate force. The entire point of ethics is to help me survive and thrive long term. So if I want to, if I'm saying, well, how should society be organized or whatever, I think that it should be organized in such a way as to maximize my ability to act in my own interest. It should protect my right to do so. If a type of society will not do that, then that type of society is not one that I would advocate for. So that is why I oppose anarcho-capitalism. I firmly hold, and we can get into the debate, that my rights are necessarily insecure under an anarcho-capitalist system. Therefore, I have the absolute right to prevent such a system from coming into being. Now, somebody may come and say, oh, but you're initiating force. We can argue about that. I don't really think so. But by saying violates the NAP, or non-initiation of force, how I would put it, is a derivative downstream conclusion. The root of that conclusion is my self-interest, my ability to act in my interest. I am not going to elevate a downstream conclusion, not initiating force, against the root, which is my own interest. So that's what I mean by rights. And that is what I mean when I'm saying that those need to be secure. And I think I can demonstrate that they are necessarily insecure under anarcho-capitalism, much in the same way that economic calculation is impossible under socialism. And with that, I turn it over to my worthy temporary debate adversary.
Yeah, well, if you're really looking for a hardcore debate on all the things, you might be disappointed. I would say I agree with about 99% of what you said. Most of my moral framework outside of anarcho-capitalism is very closely aligned to yours. The conception of how I view rights personally in my moral framework, as they're used, I agree. We have a disagreement with. The thing is that how would I put this? The major point of contention here that you started off with, which is just a complete straw man, but I'm not trying to, accuse you. Maybe you just simply misunderstood. When I say there is no oughts, I never made such a claim at all. I wouldn't make that claim. I'm completely against that claim. There are absolutely moral oughts. There is a difference between it should be obvious that anarcho-capitalism, isolated from objectivism, is an incomplete philosophy. And I would also say that I believe, and maybe this is hubristic of me, that I think that objectivists that don't embrace anarcho-capitalism are simply missing some steps in their logic. I don't think that either of them is, I do think that objectivism is fleshed out, but I think it falls into contradiction. And it falls into contradiction when people that are objectivists try to rationalize a minimal state, right? And so I think the simplest way of kind of pointing this out or is just to ask a question, right? Which is, when you impose a state on me, what happens when I refuse to pay taxes? Either A, this is involuntary taxation, and this is altruism. This is against those very virtues that you are proclaiming, because it is stealing productivity from people to impose a monopoly that is almost certainly going to be less efficient than the market at providing defense and at providing protection and security, and it's securing those moral rights that you and I both agree to from an objectivist framework. Or B, they're completely voluntary, right? Like Galt's Gulch, right? Where it is a voluntary society, where individuals choose whether or not they wish to live there, and if they no longer agree to the values or they no longer honor the monopoly of, Judge I can never say his name, Narasegund or whatever, right?
Narasegund, we'll go with.
Sure, right? And if that's the case, if it is a voluntary taxation and voluntary association, because individuals either share those values or choose to live in by those rules because it is a functional system that is in their best interest, even if they don't understand all of the systems, but they do so voluntarily. Congratulations, 19 years after Ayn Rand dies in 82, Hans Hermann Hoppe writes Democracy, the God That Failed, and describes a covenant community. These two things are one-to-one. There's no separation between Galt's Gulch and a covenant community. Congratulations. If those taxes aren't imposed, and you're not saying that we have a positive right to protection from warlordism, and that we must forcibly extract wealth from the citizenry for their own good, for the greater good, we will steal your property and steal your currency that you use as an exchange of that property. If it's not that, then it's anarchism, and we have no argument. So this is the problem that I see, is that when when objectivists preach that anarchy isn't liberty, because there's no definitional means by which it cannot protect property. They're not saying there is no logical or definitional or contradiction that they've found. They're simply saying, I'm looking at the evidence, and it seems like nation states are somehow better at protecting liberty than are Galt's Gulch, covenant communities, or systems where we are freer and privatized, right? Like, I think Ayn Rand was like really, really on to something, right? When she kind of like realized that English common law was using reason, not legislation, to discover objective law occurring between the free associations of people, and not simply imposing it, and that civilization is progressing towards privatization. And the ANCAP that aligns with the objectivist moral framework is saying there's just one more step for you to take. That's all we're saying, is that Ayn Rand was right when she stated, and many, many times, that we're moving towards privatization. We have the technology, we have the means, and it is logically grounded, if you choose to accept that framework or not. I would say that the rational, logical consequence of both anarcho-capitalism with objectivist, leanings, and pure objectivism in the Randian sense leads towards anarcho-capitalism. It leads towards the dissolution of the state, because you cannot say you are against altruism and you are against, positive rights, and that you want interactions between man to be productive, and at the same time, you yourself engage in the economic calculation problem because you are utilizing central planning and the central state to steal from people to plan our national defense.
Okay. So first of all, neither I nor Ayn Rand favored compulsory taxation. So that's the first thing.
Well, it's an either or thing, right? It's an either or situation.
Ayn Rand and me, I wouldn't even call it taxation, because taxation implies compulsion, but voluntary taxation kind of gets to most people understand what we mean. I would say voluntary funding of the government. That's the first thing. Secondly, you said something interesting about these judges, because you followed Zulu's lead. I don't know if you got it from him or if he got it from somewhere else where you got it from too. The idea that common law judges were just looking and discovering objective law. That's codswallop, right?
I didn't get it from Zulu, but
no, but I'm saying he uses this. I don't know. Maybe you both got it from the same thing. It is true that sometimes it's referred to as judge found law. Far more often, it's referred to as judge made law. Right.
Yeah.
The justices were not simply looking out at objective reality and deciding and discovering the objective rules of law in a legal system. That's not what was happening. That's why, by the way, no,
it's not my claim for the record.
Okay. So there's a reason why you needed Magna Carta. There's a reason why they needed the Petition of Right. It's a reason why they needed the English Bill of Rights. And by the way, is a reason why the United States decided to codify it in written law to take the law out of the arbitrary decisions of judges. So that's the first thing. The Galt's Gulch analogy to Hoppe's covenant communities. The problem is one of scale, right? Galt's Gulch, first of all, it's fiction. Let's put that out there. Secondly, it's an isolated community in the mountains consisting of a small group of people who are by and large all geniuses who all share the same values. They live in this area and they have a final arbiter for disputes according to a given set of laws. Hoppe's covenant community, first of all, if you were to institute just one covenant community, you would run into the same problem Galt's Gulch did, where they needed a laser protection system to protect them from the outer state. And by and large, this is what happens. Vincent Galoso, in his studies of close to anarchic systems, has demonstrated that they are an unstable equilibrium, meaning that either they will be invaded and taken over, or they will develop a state for protection. So you're not just talking, when you're talking about anarcho-capitalism, you're not talking about one single covenant community. You're talking about an abundance. You're talking about scaling them. So here's the problem. If you have a government, let's say there's a government over the entirety of the United States right now.
This is like a second intro statement, by the way. No. I got a lot to address. I'm trying to write it all down.
Well,
you've made a ton of different arguments.
Yeah, but they're all going. I'm responding to what you said, to the things that you said in your thing.
I just want to be careful that we don't miss anything by doing
10-minute
responses. Yeah.
Okay, well that's you could respond to. Take your time. If there's a government as there is in the United States right now, and it's run according to the same basic federal structure where there's federal, local, and state, federal, state, and local laws, except for we convince enough people to get this government to run according to voluntary funding and limit itself solely to protecting the rights of the citizens to their lives, their liberty, and the property that they can justly accumulate. That's what they're doing. Now you have Fabians, let's say I am a citizen of this country, but Fabian decides in Connecticut, that's where I live, that he wants to open Fabian's protection agency. Okay, Fabian, you're perfectly within your rights to open up a protection agency. And let's say Liquid Zulu signs up for Fabian's protection agency. So you're protecting Liquid Zulu. That's all fine and dandy. Now, one day, Liquid Zulu comes to Fabian's protection agency and says, Liebowitz just robbed me. He's gone. He took off, but he just robbed me. So Fabian's protection agency, wanting to protect Zulu's rights, says, okay, we're going to go and we're going to apprehend Liebowitz, but we're going to, go to his government. The government says, absolutely not. We are not turning Liebowitz over to you. We will try Liebowitz. He will get a trial by jury. Zulu can testify. But you say, well, hold up a second. That's an initiation of force against me. You're preventing us from protecting our guy, Zulu. We're going to arrest Liebowitz. So you come and you arrest me. The government comes, rescues me, arrests you, and the agency members that took part in apprehending me. So my simple question is, in that scenario, who has initiated force?
Yeah, so I will answer that question. I promise. I want to get back.
You can address it all, but I'm just saying, but I just want that question. But go ahead.
Yeah, there's a government, Liquid Zulu analogy, protection agency. Then you went into, so first and foremost, scalability is a problem. Scalability is a problem for any society, right? Like that is true of any government. That's true of any nation state. It'll be a problem in your Miniker's government. It'll be a problem in every empire that has ever existed, right? Things get more difficult as they scale up. This is just true because humans have subjective values, right? And as you get more and more people together with different subjective values, you are likely to engage in more conflicts. And it's also true that, like Weber, I think probably, accurately discovered the problems of bureaucracy, right? As institutions grow larger, you have to have more and more middleman to maintain the hierarchy. And the more and more middleman you have, the more the private property owner, or the head of the pyramid is separated from the management process, and there's layers. And so you get it. The larger an institution is, the slower it is to adapt to be able to deal with specific things, and the more you get, a tendency towards corruption, right? So this will be true. This is true of the minarchist United States under the Articles of Confederation and the very limited government, right? We grew, we gained more power, and over and over and over again, government expanded, it became less efficient, right? Like we had a pretty minarchist situation. Now, obviously, Rand kind of like critiques heavily that there wasn't, an amendment to the Constitution protecting capitalism or protecting the free trade, and production of people, right? Like obviously she would have done things differently, making that. But we've had a fairly minarchist government before. And the problem was, democracy and compulsion. And you said, I'm not for, and Rand's not for, which is true, right? Compulsory taxation. If you're not for compulsory taxation and you're not imposing that anybody pay for those systems, then then first and foremost, you're getting a lot closer to anarchy, right? Because you're whether or not you actually are a state now becomes dependent upon one thing, which is the monopoly of force to be able to say, you are a criminal, therefore we will house you, or we will, kill you, or we will take you out, or we will remove you, whatever ought to be done, right? We'll say ought be done here to the criminal. The problem with that is I would also say is scalability. I don't know how you're going to voluntarily pay for very large nation states military, in like 10%. I mean, like you're looking at hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars that you're going to have to voluntarily gain. I don't think that's likely that feasible, but let's say for all intents and purposes, people see the value of United States of America and they see the value of, $500 billion a year, and so everyone kind of voluntarily pays for that national defense to the state. I also, this thing that you did, right? And so this kind of gets into this other thing is instead of critiquing the logic of anarcho-capitalism, or right, I don't think, maybe you're not denying it, maybe that's interesting, right? Maybe you're not denying that anarcho-capitalism enshrines those same rights, but you're denying its efficiency, right? I would say that, if you understand the economic calculation problem, then you should understand why the state is likely to be less efficient than those markets. But setting aside all of that, you created this scenario. So now I want to answer this scenario, which is, I am a rights enforcement agency for Liquid Zulu, and Liquid Zulu is, Michael Liebowitz robs Liquid Zulu, presumably.
Okay.
I said presumably, right?
No,
Like
you didn't. Go ahead.
Right. Like I added it, like, as you were saying, no.
Yeah.
Right. Like I was right. Presumably, right. He's accused, like Michael Liebowitz is accused of robbing Liquid Zulu. Now, Michael Liebowitz leaves the jurisdiction, leaves the area of whatever town that I police, and goes to another area. And when he gets to that area says, hey, we're going to try Michael Liebowitz.
Hold on. That's not. No.
Sorry,
I'm not.
You said so much.
No, I get it. No.
It's a bit of a gish gallop.
I'm saying this. No, it's not. Really not. What I'm saying is there's already a government with a jurisdiction over this area. You happen to be operating a defense agency within this government's jurisdiction. That's what I'm saying. Not that there's two separate jurisdictions.
Okay. So there's, let's say, Cook County, right? There's Cook County.
I said Connecticut, but we can do Cook County. Okay.
I couldn't remember where. Connecticut. So there is a government in place.
Yeah.
Now it's not. Is it a state, or is it because you were trying to give an example, I presume, of anarchism, right? So is it anarchism, or is it a state?
No, what I said was this, and I get there's a lot there. What I said was it's basically the government of the United States that we have now. There's federal, state, local branches, except for the government is run completely according to protecting individual rights at all levels. It's funded voluntarily and it's completely dedicated to protecting individual rights. Now, within this jurisdiction, you've opened up a defense agency. Nobody stops you. You can have a bodyguard agency. That's fine. And you are defending Liquid Zulu. That's the.
Well, I would say
scenario.
the state is the aggressor here. And the reason the state is the aggressor, assuming we have all things else being equal to our governmental structure, in terms of judge, juries, monopoly on force, right? Is they are an aggressor insofar as they do not operate under the consent of the victim. Liquid Zulu has not consented to the state trying the criminal. They have stolen Liquid Zulu's right to restitution and retribution. They're going to use a criminal justice system that doesn't necessarily give restitution towards the crime to Liquid Zulu. Maybe he gets his property back. Maybe he doesn't get his property back. Well, it depends on how the monopoly on violence is handled there. And then they're going to say what Liquid Zulu can do, as opposed to Liquid Zulu's right, which is the right to restitution and retribution, right? So if he comes onto your property and breaks your fence and person, right? It might be like Liebowitz, might not be Michael Liebowitz, whomever, breaks his fence, steals his TV, then he has the right to that person is stopped from arguing their rights. If that person is objectively the person that has committed the crime, they are stopped from saying Liquid Zulu ought not come to my house and take my TV, because their actions are proving what it is that they have argued for. Their actions have proven that they are a thief, that they are a criminal, that they are an outlaw, that they steal TVs. And until they give Liquid Zulu his TV back and they pay for his fence and, they pay for we'll say retribution here. I'm iffy on retribution. And if we get too deep into the theory on it, right? So we'll leave retribution aside for now, and just say restitution, right? Until they fix his fence, pay for whatever, other things he went through, get him his TV back. They can't argue people ought not steal the TV from him. And the state, as the arbiter in this situation, that has taken him, they have done so without the consent of Liquid Zulu. Zulu is the victim. He has not consented to the state putting him in jail somewhere and not giving him his money back for his fucking TV.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the big problem. And this is why I asked the question. You're assuming Zulu is the victim. Zulu has reported that I robbed from him.
This is not a gotcha. No, I'm going to stop this.
No.
I respect you a lot.
How's it got you? How's it got you?
It's a nonsense, because I said presumably and assuming over and over and over again.
But Fabian, at the end, you said that the state is the one initiating force because they're robbing the victim of his rights.
Yeah, we are assuming in this analogy whether like you can't say this thing occurs right now. No, this is.
I didn't say it occurred, Fabian. I didn't say it occurred. You listen. This is my.
This is verbal wizardry. This is
not verbal wizardry, and it's not sophistry. You listen.
If you want to
say that,
if you want to remap the analogy, we can remap the analogy.
I don't have to remap it. This is my entire point.
I'm working under the assumption that you're good faith, and I know.
How am I not? Hold on. How am I not good faith?
Because you had me go through this entire analogy.
No, I did not.
Waiting for the gotcha
Bullshit.
to be like, aha, you assumed the event that I described occurred.
No,
yeah, assuming the event you described. It's a hypothetical.
I did not want to interrupt you. I at no point said that a robbery actually took place. I never said it.
Okay.
And that's the entire point.
Let's stop real quick, very quickly. If I am misunderstanding your analogy, interrupt me, bro.
Okay,
be like, no, this is different. Right? Just interrupt. I don't want to go on a whole tangent.
No.
I thought you were sitting there being like, I got his ass. He's walking into the trap. My bad. All right. If I'm misunderstanding your analogy, please clarify.
Fabian, my entire point is when ANCAP say NAP, you can't violate it. They almost assume a perfect knowledge of what's going on. I'm going to tell, because this is the entire point of the analogy. In this situation, all we know is Liquid Zulu has claimed that I've robbed him. We have a government That government is already in place that is committed to protecting the rights of everybody that's within its jurisdiction, Connecticut. So that includes Zulu's rights. It includes my rights. Zulu has gone to you, who's his protective agency, and told you that I robbed him. Now you go to my government and they say, listen, we'll handle all the evidentiary procedures, due process, we'll try them. You say no, you're going to handle it and you take me. But according to my government, they're there to protect my rights and you've taken me unjustly. There has to be procedures in order to say whether this crime actually was committed and whether I was the one. And one of the, okay, then how do you solve that scenario? That's my question. Who initiated
your scenario? Your scenario. You asked me who initiated force. I'm running under the assumption that the robbery actually occurred and that the conflict is between.
No, we don't know it occurred.
Hold on. Right.
That's the
conflict. Okay. The conflict. I was running under the assumption that the conflict is between the private rights enforcement agency and the state, and the estate is obviously the aggressor here, right? Because it is assuming that it's taxing people and that it's saying I am the arbiter because of democracy.
Hold on. Okay, you told me to interrupt you, but you already know that I said that this is a government that's not taxing people. I've already made that's the hypothetical. So the hypothetical has to do with you. We don't know whether a rights violation is actually taking place.
Hold on.
We know Zulu has claimed it.
So you're saying a government that is objectivist in framework moves into Connecticut, right? They go,
no,
hold on.
No.
Okay. Well, how does it?
Because we've already have right now the United States government,
which is horrible, right?
Got
we
it.
both
I don't
agree
disagree.
All these rights violations. Right?
No, I don't disagree. But what we have is we have the United States government. We have a federalist structure where we have the federal government, state government, local government. Now, what I'm saying is now both of you and I are making arguments, not here. I mean, in general, in life, to get the type of system we want established. So I'm saying, assume I've won this argument. Not with you, but in general. And I've now got the government in the United States operating according to the principles that I want. It has a monopoly on force in a given geographic area, but it does not use compulsory taxation. And the only laws it enforces are to protect rights. That's the government I'm talking about.
Let me clean up the analogy to understand, to illustrate my philosophy on the conflict, right? Instead of Zulu just hiring, Scott Enterprises, right? What Zulu, Scott, and let's say 1,000 other people do is they form a homestead, purchase all the private property in an area of Connecticut because they don't like the way that your government does its justice system. They think it's flawed. They think that that their rights as victims are being violated in some way because they're not getting proper restitution, or maybe just the government is really inefficient. They're really, really bad at catching criminals. They're really bad at prosecutions. Their trial by jury never fucking works, right? And there's like Connecticut has become overrun with, let's just say, this imaginary scenario where, like, I don't know, some random black dude has been arrested 36 times and he's stabbing white ladies on a subway, right? I could never imagine this occurring in North Carolina right now, right? Or there's a serial puncher in Chicago that can't stop punching people, right? They feel that the state's monopoly is wholly and completely ineffective and is not providing them justice in an objective means. And they have no power, right, to democratically unseat these people or make the case that it's better. So what they do is they move all 1,200 of them, and they move to an area of Connecticut, and they say, your justice system sucks. We want no part of it. We will police ourselves. We will act like the Amish. We're going to live in our own little system, right? Now, by your definition, are they the aggressor when a crime occurs and the state of Connecticut comes in and says, we would like to try this person in our presumably super fucked up, never works legal system that is full of all kinds of inadequacies when they all voluntarily move there? If not, then we have anarchy. We have polycentrism. We have the thing that you're so scared of accepting, unless you agree that they must say that they are aggressors by choosing to separate themselves and create their own legal system.
So the only type of government Now, obviously, there's scales, and obviously, truth be told, the chances that either one of the systems that you and I are arguing for ever actually happens are slim, right?
I think they're inevitable.
Okay, so
just maybe not in our lifetime. I think.
But that's what I'm talking about.
Is more efficient.
No,
and
but
so
I'm
because
talking
it's
about
more efficient, we'll eventually get there.
I'm talking
out.
about you and I in the world that we're going to live.
Also, they were in Prospero up until like 6 months ago. Like a couple thousand people already lived under anarcho-capitalism.
Okay.
Had to pay like a
so here's the thing.
Tax.
First of all, the government that I proposed, all it was doing is protecting rights. But let's take your hypothetical. They move into these 1,000 people. They run into a gated community. Are they going to stay in that community and never leave?
I mean, I don't know if it breaks the analogy one way or the other, but to steel man you, let's assume they sometimes leave out of that community to go like trade, and then they go back to the community. But also, let's assume the presumed crime and jury and everything occurred within their private gated community.
Okay, let's say same thing in that community. Liquid Zulu goes to the defense agency that's operating within this community and says that I've robbed him. He says that I've come in. He says I've come into that community and I've robbed him.
Okay, from outside of the community.
Yep, that's his claim. It's a claim.
Yeah, of course.
Liquid Zulu goes to the head of this agency and says, I've been robbed. I know it was Liebowitz. He did it. You come out, you go to the prosecutors, the governor, the police, and say, listen, we want to try Liebowitz. Zulu claims Liebowitz robbed him. We want to try him. My government says, no way. You guys can do whatever the hell you want on your little piece of land. But Liebowitz is a part of our government. Even your place is our jurisdiction, but we don't really care what goes on in there. But now you're claiming that somebody from that's in this jurisdiction went in there and robbed you. We are not going to turn over him to you. We are committed to protecting his rights. We are also committed, by the way, to protecting your rights. But we have an accusation that we don't know if it's true. We will try Liebowitz. And whatever happens, if he's found guilty, he will be punished. But you say, no, we have the right. We're saying this happened in our territory. You come and get me.
Let's not tell me what I say. I understand you're trying to clean up the analogy, but like, don't say, no, you say this when I'm not per se saying.
Okay, so you don't care. If you say that you have no problem with my government taking control and trying me, case closed. We don't have to argue about it.
So what I would say is this, that in reality, either you did or you didn't rob Liquid Zulu. Can we agree to that? One of those two things is true, right? Like, so from formal logic, either it is true or it is false.
Of course,
that you robbed him. Right?
Of course.
And the purpose, we'll say, right? The purposeful behavior of imposing justice through whatever legal system you are using, if it is a valid legal system, is to ascertain the truth of that fact, which is the objective fact of whether or not you did or didn't rob Liquid Zulu. Can we agree to that? Is that fine?
Is that the point? Is to figure out the truth of the matter? That's what you're saying? Yeah.
Well, and then punishment would be like
obviously first, the next thing, you're going in steps. If I'm guilty, then to punish me and perhaps pay restitution to whatever the degree that it's determined.
Right.
Yep.
My contention as an anarchist, right, is that whether or not we know the objective fact that Michael Liebowitz did or did not rob Liquid Zulu is a pragmatic concern in our ability to engage in reality and determine that fact. But there is a fact out there. And so in option A, where let's say you did rob him, option B, you did not. In option A, if you robbed him and then the state of Connecticut chooses to try or investigate you and is woefully inadequate to the task and lets you back out onto the street and says, if you try and capture Michael Liebowitz, then you have violated Michael Leibowitz's rights because the state of Connecticut is protecting his rights. We gave him this trial, right? Then it would be true it would be true in reality that the state is engaged in violating Liquid Zulu's rights, because you did indeed rob from him and he got no restitution for being robbed. But we live in an imperfect world. I do not, anarchy, insofar as the ANCAP variety is concerned, we do not argue for the utopia. We do not argue that we
there
have
is
perfect right. There is none.
Neither would I. But this is
Right.
this is the whole problem. I went through this whole sort of thing with Liquid Zulu, and he assumed that he has the perfect knowledge to go and get the guy. The problem is that we're not dealing with a justice system where we assess everything after the fact. You're dealing with real life scenarios beforehand. What do you do in this scenario?
Yeah, I'm trying to answer I'm trying to answer the quandary now that we have state of Connecticut, we have Ozark area, right, where like the white only town, right? Let's assume that's what's going on, and like maybe they're really racist towards people whose last name is Liebowitz, right? And so they're falsely accusing you of a crime. There's all different kinds of situations here. What I am saying is that it is going to be true no matter what we do, where some people's rights are going to be violated, both voluntarily because human beings have free will and some will choose to engage in fraud, violence, etc., and involuntarily or accidentally, right? Like sometimes I might accidentally think I'm in the woods, and we can and the purposeful action of going through a trail, I get lost and I end up on your property and I'm trespassing, right? Now, whether or not I'm guilty of the crime trespassing from an objectivist perspective might deal with like with like ration and reason and volition and whether or not you properly embroidered your property. I don't want to get into all that shit, right? I just mean to say that sometimes people are going to accidentally violate people's rights, or and sometimes people are going to purposefully violate people's rights. Doesn't matter what system we set up for. That doesn't mean that we set up one that is conflict inducing and then call that an ethical system. And what I'm saying is when a state claims that they are the monopoly and that they can enforce their monopoly on everyone and no one else is allowed to engage in voluntary agreements beforehand to set up systems of justice without their say so, that is a conflict inducing system. If I say I'm going to set up, I'm going to go live in this community and this is the rules of how we deal with things, and everyone that moves into this community agrees to those rules and that final arbiter, right? And then the state comes in and says, you're not doing it the way that we say you're supposed to do it, or we have the right to come into your property and your land and grab people that we say are criminals or grab people that we say are, et cetera, and that monopoly force that isn't voluntary. It's not by the will of the victims. It's not by the will of the people of Connecticut, just because they presumably vote for their politicians, or, you know what I mean? Like if people disagree to that system and it's being imposed on them, and then those rights violations do occur, as they inevitably will, then we have a problem here, right? They have people trying to voluntarily create systems that they choose, and then the state coming in and saying you're not allowed to do that because we're the final arbiter. And if not by the victim, then by who decides that they are the rightful arbiter?
Fabian, that's the inherent problem, is if you say if not by the victim. But the whole point of the criminal procedure is to discover if there is a victim, if so, who victimized them or her, and then what is the proper punishment if the person's found guilty. That is the thing beforehand. Now, you said something very, very important to me. You said if there's a system that's necessarily conflict inducing, then that system can't protect rights. Now, remember, the entire point of rights, and you said you agreed with me 99%, is to allow individuals to maximize their rights. I mean, to maximize their liberty, to act in their own interest, to flourish. My entire argument rests on the fact that to stop concurrent equal jurisdiction over a given piece of land, that if you have that concurrent jurisdiction, that you necessarily have a situation where people's rights are going to be violated.
It doesn't exist under anarchy.
What doesn't exist?
the concurrent jurisdiction.
Okay,
is not,
so
is
hold
not-
on a second.
it's
So
only by you have a property owner, right? I'm a property owner. I own a hotel, right? And
Yeah.
I choose what security system I want to
Yeah.
use. Now, if I'm living in a city, right,
Mm.
and let's say that city does use competing rights enforcement agencies,
Yeah.
right? Then it behooves every rights enforcement agency, if they want to get my services at all or be effective at all, to be able to have an agreement with all of the other rights
That's
enforcement
pure
agencies.
rationalism, dude. That's
not rationalism.
It is
No,
rationalism.
The private
because
property.
Dude.
You're using a stolen concept fallacy in your argument that
Dude,
you can say that,
No,
well,
I'm
since
not.
we don't know, we can impose it so that we can
No.
discover.
There's no stolen. What is a stolen? Hold on. What is a stolen concept?
Where your argument is invalidated by using the portion of your argument. You're using the end result of your argument as justification for.
No, that's not
the
what a
system.
stolen concept is. It's not. But that's
Okay,
stolen
then what
concept.
is a
Stolen concept means
fallacy?
using a concept while denying its antecedents, denying what gives rise to that concept.
You're using
that's not what you just said.
Right, but you're using objective. You're using the fact that the system works at discovering the objective morality and then denying it within the same system.
No, I'm
stolen concept fallacy probably isn't the right fallacy there.
No,
but there's something similar to that.
I'm not saying that you're ever going to have perfect systems or perfect law for discovery. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is
when I say but by the grace of the victim, you deny that a victim.
No, I didn't deny there was a victim. I did not.
There is a victim. And
no, we don't know that yet. That's my point.
In the state of Connecticut, there will be victims, right? Like statistically speaking, there's going to be victims. Of course. Okay. And those victims have not, right? All of those victims, almost certainly statistically, will not have voluntarily chosen to give the state the final arbitration in all of their concerns where they are victimized.
Not all of them, no.
So you're saying that your system, by its very nature, induces the conflict between the victim and between the monopoly force. You are absolutely
you're not
saying
Fabian. I'm not denying, first of all, that
there will be victims and their rights will be violated by the state.
Yes, but here's the problem: is that there has to be some. I didn't say their rights will be violated. What I'm saying is there has to be a mechanism.
And proper,
but there has to be a mechanism.
My bad.
There has to be a mechanism to discover whether there's actually been a victim.
Absolutely.
In a given case.
And a private system is one that isn't conflict inducing. It's not one that necessarily.
Wait a second. Hold on.
No. It's not necessary. Your system necessitates that the state will violate the rights of victims. A private arbitration does not necessitate it. It's not baked into the system.
In reality, it is. It's not if you say
I'm in reality.
Hold on. If you say
I'm in reality.
Fabian, if you say there's 30 defense agencies and they all have an agreement to go to arbitration together, then when someone agency accuses someone from one agency accuses a person from another agency of committing a crime, they've already got all these agreements. Right. And my very point is that in reality, that's not going to happen. And I can point out why it's not going to happen. It's not even difficult. I mean,
no. That's hold on. Listen, I agree that there will be conflict in reality. And just like we have in the nation state, right, where FBI and there's corruption and yes, but here's the thing is that yours bakes in conflict. Yours is a conflict-inducing situation that requires some people's rights to be violated.
This is
not rationalism. This is cope by you.
No,
this is cope because you won't accept anarchy.
No, I won't accept it because I'm dealing with reality.
Saying I'm dealing with reality is not an argument. I'm dealing with reality as well. Fabian. In reality, your system requires, right? That there will be people that are victims that do not wish for the state's imposed.
No, it doesn't require that. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Oh, it doesn't?
No, I can say the same thing because they're all just going to agree that the state can do it. Do you see the problem with doing that? That if I'm going to say, you're saying that all the agencies are going to agree. I'm saying all the victims are going to agree. What's the difference?
I'm not saying all the agencies are.
No, but that's the entire point. And given that they don't all agree, it's the same thing. Given that all the victims don't agree,
you
it's
can
the
defeat
same
my
principle.
argument if you straw man my argument, but that's not my argument. I'm not saying all the agencies will agree.
Okay.
What I'm saying is your system, in order for your system, and this gets back, in order for your system to not be conflict inducing, the way that you defeated it, right? The way that you defeated my argument, and you're right, you defeated it. You defeated it by saying every single member of society voluntarily accepts this system. The way that you defeated it,
I didn't say
the way
that.
that you got rid of the contradiction was to embrace anarcho-capitalism.
No, it wasn't.
That is exactly what you did. You embraced it the moment that you said there is not a single person in this society
That's not what I said.
no longer voluntarily agrees to it. That's the only way
but that wasn't what I said.
out of it being a conflict-inducing
But that wasn't I said. I said no victim did. I said no victim.
So every
my point. It's not realistic, dude. It's not realistic. I'm not.
It is.
No,
it is.
It's not. That's no more
absolutely realistic.
It's realistic that every victim in society is going to agree that the government should be handling their.
You're right. Your system isn't, but it's absolutely realistic that if some Elon Musk builds a bunch of robots and wants to seascape a city and invites, 50,000 people to live under a city, and he says, this is the judicial system that we're using. You can either live under this judicial system or you cannot live under this judicial system. And you can have this minimal tax, if you will, that pays for said judicial system, and you voluntarily move there.
Yeah.
And so long as they have some means of the children that are born there, like Rumspringa for Elon Musk's seascape, right? To fucking go out of the system, then it's an anarchism. That's an anarchist society. But if you impose that upon people,
the only
then it's not.
No, here's the thing. If Elon Musk wants to buy Connecticut, right? I don't know who you would buy it from, but let's just say a large tract of land, and he wants to do what you just said.
He builds SpaceX in Texas.
That's all fine.
He builds a city.
People can go there voluntarily. Where I'm saying conflict happens is where the people within that community end up interacting with people outside of that community. And if
that's not
now,
conflict inducing.
No, hold on. Of course, well, it's inevitable. Well, if you're going to say
yes, it's inevitable.
Yeah,
but it's not conflict inducing.
It's inevitable. There will be conflict, which means what I'm saying is that as long as all these different people have different defense agencies. See, when you insert Hoppe's idea of covenant communities, right? Now, in order for that to work, you need all these covenant communities. But if you don't, if you got individuals like I have a house, my neighbor has a house, neighbor next door, neighbor next door, neighbor next door. If each one of us has different defense agencies, rights are necessarily insecure. And I'm not saying necessarily in the sense that a bachelor is necessarily not married. What I'm saying is that necessarily what ends up happening is different agencies go by different rules and different laws, and they're going to disagree. And there's no way you can, if you just postulate, well, everybody agrees. What I'm saying is the laws of probability don't allow that. In order for people to be free, they need to have a known law. They need to be able to know what the law is ahead of time so that they know how to behave and what are rights violations or what are legal violations. Now, even amongst people, let me just finish this thought. Even amongst people who agree 100% on individual rights, you end up with disagreements. Simple one. People disagree over age of consent. Some people think it should be 18. Some people think it should be 16. Some people think 14, whatever. Think whatever you want. The problem is,
let's not whatever that, but okay.
No, we're gonna.
Let's not say think whatever you want.
Yeah, because I really
let's say we both have strong opinions that people shouldn't fuck kids,
no,
and then move on.
But I don't. But for the analogy, it doesn't matter who thinks what. The point is you're going to have different people that think different things about this topic. Even people that agree on the rights. Now, if everybody gets to have their own defense agency that are all interwoven in a given community, it could be 4 blocks, 6 blocks, 8 blocks, 10 blocks, 1,000 blocks. It doesn't matter. Now you have all these people. Now you have an 18-year-old kid whose defense agency says it's perfectly fine to have sex with a 17-year-old girl. We'll defend you. will defend your rights. That's our law. He goes and has sex with a 17-year-old girl. Her parents have a defense agency that says no fucking way. Consent's not till 18. We want this dude arrested for rape. Her agency is 100% committed to protecting her rights. His is 100% committed to protecting his rights. You have no reconciliation. And because it happens in the same geographic area amongst these interwoven houses, there's no way to know ahead of time what you're going to do. That's just one example. When everybody has their own defense agency, when there's no monopoly on retaliatory force, necessarily in reality, you are going to run into an abundance of conflicts. Rights are necessarily insecure because people don't know how to act ahead of time. We can use IP as an example. You could use speed limits as an example. I mean, there's a million things you can, not a million, that's an exaggeration, but there's a lot of things that you can use as an example. And by the way, you don't have a final arbiter. So if you try me in your court and I'm found guilty, I say, no, I don't want that. I don't trust that verdict. And I just keep going and going and going and going. And eventually, even Rothbard concedes it's going to have to stop. So where does it stop?
Okay.
In my society, you have a final arbiter.
I have a bunch of things to go.
Okay, I just want to tell you, it's 7:06. I planned on going to about 7:30. I can go a little longer.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm down for everyone. So
no, I just don't want to. You know, you're making a point, and I'm like, I gotta go.
It's not going to be a 24-minute point. I promise. So first of all, your arguments could be used towards a one world government, right? Yeah, absolutely. You can disagree with that.
Walter Block tried this same argument, but go ahead.
Well, you later cleaned up the analogy and say locally.
So did Gene Epstein just yesterday, by the way.
Okay. Well, Gene Epstein might be making a few mistakes. He's getting up there in years, boys. All right?
He's a great guy.
Anyways,
shout out to Gene Epstein. Anyway,
shout out to Gene Epstein. But I don't mean that as an insult. I'm just teasing.
No, I know.
But I do think that the logical conclusion of your argument that there is conflict because there is competition on the rights. Like this happens at the border all the time.
But that's not my argument. No, it's not my argument.
No, okay, I let you.
No, but you told me to interrupt if you got my analogy wrong. So that's why I don't want.
I'm not getting your analogy wrong. What I'm doing is I'm saying that your logic is wrong, and I'm arguing that it's wrong.
But what you just stated was not my position.
Every time you disagree.
No. But what you just stated was not my position. I'm not. My position is that in a given geographical area. So if you had 30
what happens at the border of a different geographical area, then you have conflict.
Hold on, if it's right at the border, if it's right, if it's
SpaceX is at the border, we have a border problem in America, right? Like there are a lot of nations in this country. We could resolve all of those conflicts logically by your prescriptions by just making a one world government that is, objectivist in its framework. If there's a one world government that's going to be entirely rights protecting, I don't give a damn. I'm just saying it's not a necessary consequence. Since we are no longer in the realm of whether or not we are 100% worried about whether or not the right was violated or not violated, but now we are in the world of whim. We're in the world of preference, right? We're in Michael Leibowitz's world where we're just kind of doing things.
How?
That's absolutely. You're in the world of preference.
It's not. It has nothing to do with preference.
We are absolutely are. Because, here we go. So by your logic, every person that has, let's say, a sub 85 IQ is like not capable of like engaging in the world with any rational or reasonable sense, right? So do they lose rights or do they? I don't understand. Where is that? You said that you have to be aware of all the laws. Everywhere, there's a complex set of laws. Are there not? No. Okay, there's nobody's ever. They have to be knowable. No. I'm going to critique your argument, and then I'll let you gish gallop several different arguments. And now every time I'm like, I think this is wrong. Here's why I think this is wrong. You're like, no. Let me respond to that. You're misstating me. Write it down. You gish gallop. I'm going to respond. I didn't gish gallop anything. I've got a memory, dude. I know what I said. I've been thinking about these arguments. Hold on. I've been thinking about this, dude, for over 2 decades. I know what my points are. When you make multiple arguments, right, in a row, and then the person has to wait on all of those arguments, and then that person attempts to respond to all of those arguments, and then you come back and interrupt as they're responding to those arguments in order, right? Then it
When you
becomes a
misrepresent him, yeah. I don't want, listen, hold on. I don't even want to interrupt. The only reason I did from the get-go is because you told me to. That's the first time.
I told you my analogy was wrong.
Yeah. But now you're just misstating me.
I'm not misstating you.
Of course you are. Listen, go ahead and say it. I won't say a word. I'm just saying, but then at the end, don't tell me I played gotcha. Because that's what you did last time.
Well,
last time when I let you go on and on, you said I'm playing gotcha. I'll let you talk.
I was dealing with one argument. Okay, so well, you know what? I'll just do this. I'll just go to the end, right? Whatever. You gave an analogy, right, where you said that in the city you kind of created a nightmare scenario of anarcho-capitalism, right? What if there's like 30 different rights enforcement agencies in a city and it's super inefficient? I would say that is certainly a possibility, though that wouldn't tend that way. I think a fair assumption is that, you know, if there are all of these conflicts because of complexity and confusion and things like that, that you're going to tend towards, you know, a certain, not a monopoly, but you're going to tend towards, you know, a few large players that are engaging in all of this. You know, yeah, sure, if you go into an apartment building that's like has their own little thing, there's, you know, like you've added all this complexity. But let's assume the nightmare scenario is real. I live in like SpaceX, and Elon Musk has allowed there to, instead of being a monopoly on power and violence, rights enforcement agencies exist. There's all these different rights enforcement agencies, and they have all these different views of whether or not someone's rights were violated. You know, what those rights constitute as. They have different beliefs and judicial systems on what is, you know, the objective, you know, answer to the question, whose right was violated. My question is, in the case of the 18-year-old that has sex with the presumably willing, whether or not they're capable of consent, you know, is going to be part of the question. Whose rights were violated?
In the case of the 17-year-old?
And the 18-year-old having sex.
And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't think anybody's rights were violated in that case. But the problem is that girl might have a defense agency who differs.
Right. Okay,
that's
so
let's
change the analogy now.
People differ about that. That's the problem.
Let's change that analogy now to an 11-year-old girl and a 30-year-old man.
Sure. Well, that's
rights were violated.
Well, the 11-year-old girl, that's clear.
Okay, yeah, right. So we get two extremes. Right? So if Rights Enforcement Agency 27 is going to defend their client, right? And they're going to defend and use violence to defend the 30-year-old having sex with the 11-year-old, what ought we do to that 30-year-old and the people that are protecting?
Okay, well, in herein lies part of the problem, right? What I think objectively should be done is this guy should be arrested, tried, if found guilty, punished, right? Now,
well, let's say he's openly admitting and claiming, and his rights enforcement, everyone's claiming
he's guilty.
It is good. Like he's admitted guilt openly, publicly. He's
fine.
put it on the internet,
then,
right?
Then
like
he should be. Right, then he should be arrested. Now, unfortunately, in a situation where you have competing agencies, you inevitably are going to have agencies that defend criminals.
Okay.
Right.
Absolutely.
So now,
last part of the question.
Okay. So I just. Okay. No. You weren't done. You weren't. I thought. Okay. You just asked.
No. We were doing it back and forth. I'm sorry. I want to give you the time.
The inherent problem is when you have a monopoly on force over this area, you have an organization strong enough to handle this. In a situation with a multitude of defense agencies, and you're right, we don't know how many. We can't, but I do know that competition tends to breed a lot of variety, right? So the odds are that there's going
that's
to
the
be,
beauty of competition.
There's going to be, except for when that competition is over force, because now you're going to have agencies that will defend that 30-year-old.
Right. So that's the last question. What happens when the state of Connecticut defends the 30-year-old having sex with the 11-year-old? What do we do? If
the state of Connecticut did that, what would we do? We'd have the absolute right to use force to overthrow the state of Connecticut.
Okay, so when the state of Connecticut violates that right?
Sure.
Because the victim's not being protected, and the victim doesn't want the state of Connecticut to represent them.
But
They then gain the right.
No.
They gain the right. They gain the right
No.
to overthrow the
That's
state
not
of
why they
Connecticut
overthrew
because
it.
the state of Connecticut
Hold on.
is being a final arbiter and is not
No.
appropriately engaged. No. I'm
No,
finishing.
go ahead.
Is not appropriately engaged in objectivist law, right? An objective.
I don't like the term
So the moment they
objectivist law.
step-
I'm just going to tell you, I don't like the term.
Objective. Well, objective law is a pretty common term. We'll say
No, I
natural
like
law if you wanna
objective
come to
law.
my
No, I
side.
like objective law. I don't like
Objective
objectivist
law.
law.
Yeah, sure.
It's a different.
Objective law. Okay, so long as the state is always engaged in objective law, right? Then there's no means to overthrow it, right? But if the state violates one victim's right, they get it wrong, intentionally so, right? Like we'll say, well, like I really want to steel man it, right? Like intentionally so. I don't want to. Like maybe sometimes accidents happen, like maybe the investigation.
Yeah, we have a scummy state.
Intentionally, right? They intentionally say, actually, Aisha was perfectly fine when Muhammad, decided he wanted he wanted a new wife, right? And so that's what the state law. The moment that one victim is not, their rights are not being protected by the state, we can overthrow the state.
Well, that's the problem. Is it's an inherently complex question that you're asking me. In principle,
it's inherently
hold on,
complex
I'm
to
gonna
have a
tell
bunch
you.
of rights enforcement agencies too.
Hold on,
That's your argument against me.
No, what I'm going to say is this: because first of all, the entire state is not acting. That's the first thing. So what I would say is, off the bat, if say there's a prosecutor that's doing that prosecutor should be arrested in Hall by the entire state. Is that, to say the majority of the legislatures of both houses, the governor, if all these people are that corrupt that they're going to defend somebody intentionally that they know is a rights violator, yeah, get rid of them.
How are we going to overthrow a prosecutor with our violence without overthrowing the state of Connecticut?
Well, listen. Well,
if the prosecutor is
he could get fired.
Yeah, but if the prosecutor is engaged in protecting pedophiles, right? And we say get rid of them, and then the state says no, we're going to protect them.
Then listen,
we overthrow the state.
If you've got that corrupt of a state, but that's not the same scenario as the one we had earlier on. If you have a state that's intentionally doing that, yeah, of course. My problem is with this.
So you have a right to overthrow a state if that state is no longer representing your rights. Correct?
You have the right to overthrow a state that is deliberately protecting rights violators.
Okay, or just by virtue of not prosecuting, by virtue of inaction.
By virtue
correct?
of saying this is okay that this guy's doing this.
Right. So
not by virtue of
refuses.
Yeah, not because if they didn't think he was guilty, they didn't think there was enough evidence. If objectively it was he said, she said, the case you gave me was everybody involved knows this guy's guilty, and they're saying it's fine.
Okay, so okay, all right. So in the scenario, in order to have the right from an objectivist framework to overthrow a state,
I don't like
the state
that.
must be
Please don't say objectivist framework. Because it makes it like I'm speaking for all objectivists, and I'm not. You know what I mean?
Okay, well, under Michael Liebowitz's position, right? Yeah, and that's fair. That's fair. So in order to have the right to overthrow the state must be intentional in its refusal to protect rights, and by virtue of it being a monopoly. Right? No one else has the right to protect those rights. So we can then overthrow that state.
I would say yes. But with the qualification. So
we have a right.
Hold on, let me
to
read my
rights,
qualification.
Right? Okay.
Well, I don't like that framework. We have a right to our rights. We have our rights. Right?
Right. Well,
that's
I feel like I'm found something.
Yeah, we have a moral claim to our moral claims. I mean, then we could add another level. We have a moral claim to our moral claims. All I'm saying to you is, within the framework that you just gave me, I'm going to say yes.
Okay, cool. So
but there could be
a
very variables that could come in that would change my mind. In reality, given your hypothetical that the entire government is in on not protecting the victims of rape, yeah, I'm cool. I'm cool with overthrowing them.
So we understand that objective law is not created by the state, right? That objective law exists outside of the state.
Hold on. There are objective laws. Yes, there's objective principles. But no matter what, and this is, I hate to keep putting Zulu, but I lump all you guys together, even though I shouldn't. It just happens.
So the state doesn't create objective laws? Or
No. There are objective laws. But in any system you have, there's going to be an element of, if not arbitrary, then elements of choice. For instance, what is the objective amount of jurors that's appropriate? That's best for due process. Is it 6? Is it 12? Is it right that a person needs to have an attorney? Is that necessary?
That's the one that's voluntarily decided on in a private market, not one imposed by the state arbitrarily.
But there's still,
that's the right. The victim and the person that voluntarily
what if they disagree? What if they disagree? What if
that's what a rights enforcement agency in a private market can decide? You voluntarily sign up for those things, and you do not engage.
This is if you have a person that says they were punched in the face by another guy, they have two different defense agencies. They don't agree on the amount of jurors that you're supposed to have. You just said that's what would happen, is they'd all be voluntary. They disagree. So how do you resolve it?
Okay, so you have two defense agencies that are working in the same jurisdiction that have no means of resolution, and that's what they sell, and everybody just buys it. Everybody goes, I'm going to buy a defense agency that has no formal process for arbitration and has no legal system.
What they're going to buy is the system that is best going to protect them.
Yes,
that's
what
they're going to buy.
That's going to best and effectively protect and is the most judicious and protect their rights and is in their rational self-interest is one that has a means of arbitration. Is one that is agreed in that area,
but
not one that is imposed upon them.
No,
maybe they think 12 jurors is good. Maybe they think 9 jurors is good. What matters is, did the crime occur or did it not occur?
But you don't know that ahead of time. You have to figure that out.
Nobody knows that.
Exactly.
The state doesn't know that.
Nobody does.
The private system doesn't know that. Objective law is not created by the state. Yes or no?
Our objective rights, we're not created by the law, but by judges, by legislatures. No, objective rights are not created. There's no positive rights. Process laws. To say that there's objective true, every process law is objective, is beyond silly. It's absolutely beyond silly.
I don't think I'm making that claim.
No, but that was my point that you were responding to. Earlier you asked me, and what I'm saying is that the amount of jurors, for instance, the amount of time when a person has a right to a speedy trial. How long is a speedy trial? Is it 6 months? Is it 8 months?
Well, a right to a speedy trial or right to a trial by jury, these are things that are only created as a means of the state existing, right? Those aren't real rights.
Oh, no, exactly. So even if you got rid of the state altogether, you would still have to have some sort of process to discover who's guilty of what crime.
Absolutely.
Right.
So
there's no objective process.
What I'm saying is person A, person B. Person A violates the rights of person B, and that's the reality. Now, be it a state, be it private markets, be it whatever, nobody knows with absolute certainty in this instance, right? That person A absolutely violated the rights of person B. What we know is that there's a claim, and that there's evidence, and that the person is claiming to be a victim, right? So there's no reason why the state ought be the final arbiter if your argument is based upon efficiency, right? Your argument, what you're doing is that you're strawmanning the anarcho-capitalist system.
My argument's not about efficiency. Like, when did I ever say that? When did I say we need to be efficient? I never said that once. Never, not one time.
All of your arguments against anarcho-capitalism haven't been. Hold on, I'm going to answer your question, which is, when did you say this? You did not explicitly say it's about efficiency.
No.
But all all of your arguments have been from the basis of inefficiencies and the basis of presumed conflicts because of those inefficiencies.
That's not, I would say effectiveness, not efficiency. And when I say effectiveness, effectiveness
I think
at
the
one
state
thing,
is very ineffective.
that's fine. Hold on.
And it has been proven itself many times over to be very ineffective.
But nobody here, not me, not anybody, is defending the current
effectiveness and efficiency is essentially.
No, they're really not.
Right.
But they're not. But effective means the efficiency has to do with speed and getting things done. Effectiveness means actually getting what you want to get done. So when I'm critiquing anarcho-capitalism, what I'm saying is it cannot effectively protect rights.
Where is that from?
Hold on. Can we get back now? I want to make my other point.
Well, no, I was just saying, you made that claim. What is the argument?
My point is never to defend and say that this given state is protecting rights or is efficient or anything else. My not fundamental, but one of my big points is that in either scenario, for you to establish your system, for me to establish my system, ultimately the philosophy of the culture has to change. There's no way it can't. There's no way you can implement something if people don't change what they want.
Not to a grand scale. You can do it at small scale.
Sure, you have to have it. It doesn't have to be everybody on the planet, no, but you have to have a change in philosophy.
Right.
And what I'm saying
it can be done now with a small scale.
Yeah, it depends how small scale, but it's not really relevant to the point I'm making.
Yeah.
The government that I'm defending, or that I would defend, is a government that's limited to protecting rights, that is funded voluntarily, is not passing, vice laws, that sort of thing, is not going engaging militarily across the planet. All it's doing is protecting rights. Now, if that's existing, it's not going to be comparable to this behemoth monstrosity that we have today. Anywhere.
That's fair. Yeah.
Right?
America's government is probably going to be less.
Yeah. So that is what I'm defending.
I mean, it could be, but.
And I'm saying that under that scenario, rights are far more secure than they ever would be under anarcho-capitalism because of the variety in law that would be taking place in a given geographic area and the different force enforcement agencies. That's my argument from the start. Okay, it's 7:27. You can respond to that, and then I got to wrap up because I got a girlfriend that hates when I'm upstairs arguing on the internet.
Well, you get a new girlfriend. Or a second one. I don't know what to tell you, man.
First one would still be mad.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that, I think we agree on a lot of things here. I do agree that, that I would much prefer a minarchist state in that regard. I would much prefer, we're fellow travelers and all this. I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate the discussion on your show and on my show as well. My contention is simply this, is that it is my belief that we have option A or we have option B. Option A is a minimal state with a monopoly on power and violence, and a monopoly on protecting rights, we'll say. We'll just leave it at that. We'll leave out the power and violence part. And your argument is that this is the only means that a minimalist state is the only means of protecting liberty to its maximum extent, we'll say, right? And my contention is that this state bakes in conflict. And the reason this state bakes in conflict is that it deems itself the final arbiter by some decree, be it democracy, be it republicanism, be it a council of elders, whatever decree, it says, I am the final arbiter. And the only means by which there is no conflict is when every person voluntarily agrees that this person is the final arbiter. And that's anarchism. If it isn't every person that agrees that this state is the final arbiter, then there necessitates that there will be victims that do not have control over the process of their restitution and their retribution. And then, yes, we can argue that the state or a rights enforcement agency in a private market, one may be more quote unquote effective or efficient. I think that history has shown us that the state is far less efficient and far less effective and much slower to change and much less likely to get towards objective law than a private market with arbitrating firms, with different people housing themselves together based upon their values, than the state is. And the bonus is that my argument doesn't necessitate rights violations. It's not baked into the system.
Okay.
That'd be my closing
All right.
statement.
My closing statement is this. It's interesting to me that you say that the final arbiter necessitates rights violations, because I say the lack of a final arbiter necessitates rights violations. I say that a multitude of defense agencies inevitably will result in different laws over the same area, and it will inevitably result in rights violations. It will result in a situation where people don't know how to act. What I find very interesting is the argument that markets have shown themselves to be far more efficient than government, which is absolutely correct. But markets have demonstrated that when within the backdrop of government, when there's a government to enforce the rules of that market, is when markets have shown themselves to be so efficient. That's one of my arguments. But the main argument that I will always make is that it inevitably happens, is that, first of all, the purpose of rights is to allow people to flourish. The purpose of law, the purpose of government is to protect rights. In anarchy, when you have 5, 10, 15, whatever different agencies where people can go to the agency that's going to basically microscopically enforce the laws that they want, and these people are all interacting in a given geographic area, it necessitates conflict. I just want to give one example before I close. If Fabian is over my house and we're having an in-person debate, we look out the window, we see two guys fighting in the street. Now, we don't know, or they're fighting in a lawn. We don't know who each individual's defense agency is, first of all. I could call my defense agency, then maybe they'll show up. Fabian maybe calls his. The next door neighbor calls his. The two guys fighting each call one. Nobody has jurisdiction. They all show up to defend the various rights that they think they're going to protect, and you necessarily have conflict. I could multiply these examples over and over and over again. The argument that historically the state evaporates, well, the argument is historically anything that's even approached anarchy has been an unstable equilibrium that is susceptible to foreign invasion, which is something we didn't even get to here, is that you need to be able to defend yourself against foreign states. So my argument is that anarchy necessitates rights violations. Fabian's argument is that any government necessitates rights violations. I don't think we're going to resolve that tonight. I didn't think we would, but I think we got to make our cases, and I'm happy about that. Yeah. Scott, before you tell people where you're from and where they can find you, would you be interested in sometime, not right now because I got a million things, but in a couple of weeks, maybe debating argumentation ethics? Are you astute enough at argumentation ethics to actually defend that theory alone, or even interested in doing so?
I'd be interested in doing like a full breakdown of argumentation ethics, especially with an objectivist, because I think I don't have to start with existence exists, A equals A, or grounding formal logic, because our grounding is the same, right? Like we both start with the unavoidable axiom and existence exists and law of excluded middle and non-contradiction. So I can just start right at Habermas. So I feel like that would be fine.
We got a ton of comments. That's good. No super chats though. Thanks, people, for no money.
No money? You guys didn't give any money? I'm sorry. I made money tonight. I don't know if to tell anybody.
I'm new with the super. I'm new with the super chats.
I made some money tonight. So
tell them where they can find you.
You can find me Fabian Liberty on YouTube or Twitter predominantly. Please don't subscribe to my Twitch. I haven't streamed there in like 2 years. And then also, I do have a video from like 3 years ago when I was still a minarchist on how anarchic oh my God, it's like one of the first videos I ever made on how anarchist societies can effectively defend themselves and why they're better at it than nation states. So if you go to my channel, you can go check it out. It's an old video, but it's a fun one. I still think it's mostly right.
Awesome. I have a question for you when we go off, so don't go anywhere just yet. All right.
Just so you know, you'll still be live on my stream.
Okay, that's fine. I don't care about that. Okay. I just want to wrap up real quick. I guess I'll ask you right here, but I just want a yes or no. I don't want to have the big debate. Would you agree with me that the argument boils down to, would rights be secure under anarchy? That, in other words, that we have to demonstrate the logic of that rights can be secure. This doesn't have anything to do with whether rights are secure under a government, right? But would you agree that in order to say that we want to protect rights, that you'd have to be able to demonstrate that rights would be secure or likely be secure under anarcho-capitalism?
I would not agree to that. No.
Okay. All right.
I think they would, but I wouldn't agree to that.
Okay.
That isn't the ultimate argument.
So what is the ultimate argument? That's what, don't make the argument. Just, you know what I mean? Say the ultimate reason you support.
Much the same as the argument tonight. I would say if it's possible under anarchy to not be conflict inducing, then ethics is possible. And under a state, it is not possible. It is conflict inducing.
All right. So you're just saying that because it's possible, but it's not possible, not that it would happen. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm saying that the state cannot protect rights. It's not possible.
All right. Well, I thank everybody for joining us. I am going to go, and then I'll say goodbye to you on your stream, and I'll hang up if that's what the nomenclature calls for. Everybody, remember to check out.
Are we hanging up on the internet anymore? Yeah.